No, I don't think they are. It was like Monteith's, isn't it, where it moved away from Greymouth. We've got to be true to from an authenticity and provenance perspective. I 100% agree. However, I think if they don't steep the hemorrhaging, which is what they're trying to do, it would be a well worse situation.
That is a very good analogy, Monteith's, because that was a big issue, eh? People said, how on earth could one drink Monteith's if it wasn't brewed?
And there was a
brewed.
Capacity issue. There
That's
was also,
right.
yes, there's an amazing brewery experience there, and it does great things from a local environment perspective and a local economy perspective, but they weren't able to produce it all there.
Okay, so the 8 out of 10 Cats fans are really coming onto the show.
Are they?
Right, Cat.
Wow.
Well, hey,
that must be quite a reality TV show, though. 8 out of 10 Cats.
Catherine says, add to me 8 out of 10 Cats. You have to concentrate and listen. The group are actually very intelligent. What are you talking about? 8 out of 10 Cats is hosted by Jimmy Carr. It's a cross between a BBC banter comedy, panel show and countdown. Unscrambling anagrams in 30 seconds, for example. Tractor Man in Waipukaro says 8 out of 10 Cats is fantastic.
Wow, we have been missing out, Ruth.
We need to tune in.
Get in on that program.
So many. Davey says, what? 8 out of 10 Cats? Really, Wallace? Andrew says, BBC's Radio's I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, very good, is by far the best panel game show, been running since the 1960s. Look it up, it's very funny and clever. It is a great show, that one, indeed.
And my father used to listen to My Music. Did you ever listen to that? That was like they used to hum just a random tune out of a classical music piece anywhere in the world, and people would have to know what it was, and they have to come up with the whole opus. Yeah, amazing.
I play that game in the car.
Yep.
There you go.
Another one here. My dad was on Sale of the Century and won a year's supply of pantyhose and a sundial.
Winner.
Lucky dad.
We were so proud of him. David says, Wallace, I used to work with John Walker's son, a nice guy, great family, and there's a Len Brown place in Pukekohe and a Peter Snell Drive in Ruakaka.
There you go.
There is
so
a Peter
that
Snell.
just bears us out. It's going to be compulsory to have the first name as well now.
Yes. On a final note on the show this afternoon, another local story. There's tensions brewing in Hamilton where council plans to turn a lawn into a car park where performers and have performers and locals outraged. The Garden versus Tar Seal fight is about what's called the rhododendron lawn at the Hamilton Gardens. So this Hamilton Gardens, right, guess what? It has 1 million visitors a year. It is. Have you been there, Ruth?
No, I need to go.
Next level. I have. Believe.
Yeah, it's terrific. It even has a scent garden.
I mean, I was reading about this in preparation, and I was really concerned that we were digging up a whole beautiful area for some...
No, so this is a piece of lawn next to this incredible garden. I've got to say it's incredible. And they want to put more tour buses, so they want to make a bigger car park so more people can come. Ian, local issue, what are your thoughts?
So hard to tell when you're not there. I hesitate to weigh in because I'm only going on the basis of one little, article in the newspaper. However, it does sound like they need to reconsider because they seem to have missed the fact that some of the people who've performed there call it the best performance space in Hamilton and maybe in the Waikato. So in that case, I think they may have overstretched
It's a lovely space, but, you've got to get those buses in, don't you? So it's...
still got to think about it.
Yeah. Ian Talfa, Ruth Money on Friday's panel. Thank you very much. I'm off to watch 8 out of 10 Cats. So have a great weekend, Melita. Tal, thank you for producing the show. And I'm back with you Monday, 3:45. Checkpoint next. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, there's no planet B. Thousands of students nationwide get an A+ for participation in a march demanding action against climate change. What do they actually want? The gun thief who claims he was planning to spend the spoils of his crimes on plane tickets for his kids, and concerns that former landfill come time bomb is about to blow on a Dunedin beach. Why is Auckland Council recruiting building inspectors from Canada, and beneficiaries claim a postcode lottery when it comes to work and income grants? And we head into the weeds with the Aussie politician behind a new law legalising cannabis in part of Australia. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. In an act of mass defiance, the National Party has thumbed its nose at the Speaker over his ruling all political attack ads with edited parliamentary TV footage had to be removed by 5 p.m. Every single National Party MP will post a video on social media in breach of Trevor Mallard's ruling, potentially putting the entire caucus in contempt of Parliament. It comes on the back of a complaint from the Labour Party about the footage being used without MPs' permission and in a misleading way. The most recent example of the ads is Labour MP Deborah Russell being mocked for her spiel on ancient philosophers and their tenuous connection to the government's wellbeing budget. That is the ad the National Party caucus were to post en masse just as the ban kicks in. Tens of thousands of students, joined by thousands more adults, took to streets throughout New Zealand today calling for definitive action on climate change. More than 40 youth-led events were held in cities and towns here as part of Worldwide Strike for Climate events. Organisers estimated 170,000 protesters turned out in total, demanding those in power take action. For many of those marching, the Pacific Islands represent ground zero in the fight against climate change. As a crowd estimated at 30,000 moved through Wellington, it was led by young Pacific Islanders calling themselves the Pacific Climate Warriors. Mary Moeono Kōleo, the group's leader, was astounded by the turnout.
Because we've made it an intergenerational march and we're fighting for our Pacific people, that's what's made it for all these people to come out and stand as one, standing in solidarity no matter what island we come from, what we speak, just coming together.
Mary Moeono Kōleo. A Nelson-based social scientist says there will be dire consequences if the world does not reduce fossil fuel emissions very quickly. Jim Sinner, who was among more than 2,000 people at the strike in Nelson, says it's encouraging to see the mass mobilisation against a serious problem. Mr Sinner says he's worried about what his generation is leaving behind for a young generation seriously worried about its future.
We need to do the best we can to reverse these trends now. I wouldn't want to minimize their fear in any way. I mean, they're very genuine in what they're concerned about, and they have every right to be concerned.
Nelson scientist Jim Sinner. A man who stole guns and drugs from a police station was desperate to get money to see his children. Alan James Harris was charged with burglary after the guns, including an illegal semi-automatic weapon, were taken from a secure area of the Palmerston North Station in April. At the Palmerston North District Court this afternoon, Judge Lance Rowe sentenced Harris to 2 years and 3 months in prison for burglary. Judge Rowe described Harris's desperation at committing the crime so he could get money to fly his children from Australia to New Zealand.
This placed you in a position of some despair. So when you saw the opportunity to steal, and in fact you were looking over the fence to see if there was something you could steal, your motivation was to try and get money in relation to your kids.
Judge Lance Rowe. Auckland police are still working to identify a second man they believe was involved in a sexual attack on a woman in the city last Friday. A 62-year-old man was arrested yesterday in Tauranga and appeared in the city's district court this morning. He's charged with the abduction and sexual violation of a 17-year-old. He was granted interim name suppression and has been remanded in custody to appear in the Auckland District Court next month. The police say a van thought to have been used in the attack is being forensically tested. Senior Democrats in the US have welcomed the release of a whistleblower letter accusing White House officials of attempting to conceal the details of a phone conversation between Donald Trump and Ukraine's president. Notes from the call show the president asked the Ukrainian government to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden, for corruption shortly after the US withheld military aid from the country. Mr. Trump denies there was any pressure. Here's the BBC's David Willis.
What we didn't know is that the White House sought to lock down the information in order to cover it up, basically, by relocating a transcript of that conversation to a separate computer system normally used for classified information. Now, the whistleblower maintained that this was not the first time that a transcript of a call with a foreign leader had received that kind of treatment either, for political rather than national security reasons.
David Willis in Washington. Several Ihu Mātao protesters have been trespassed from Fletcher Building in Auckland. Police say they were told about 10 o'clock this morning a group had gathered peacefully outside Fletcher Building on Great South Road in Penrose. They say some on Fletcher's land were asked by officers to move onto the footpath. Several were then verbally trespassed. They left later that morning. Ihu Mātao protester leader Pania Newton says this is the first time they've been trespassed by Fletchers in the 4.5 years they've been protesting outside that building. It's 5:05. The All Blacks prop Joe Moody has questioned whether Wallabies player Reece Hodge was telling the truth when he claimed he wasn't aware of the rules around high tackles. Reece has been suspended for 3 Rugby World Cup matches in the wake of a high shot during Australia's win over Fiji last weekend. Hodge claims he was unaware of the framework surrounding high tackles, but Moody says the All Blacks were given a complete rundown on what was and wasn't allowed and penalties they'd face.
We have been told and pointed out what all the suspensions and everything are and how they're characterised. We have been sat down before the start of the tournament and told what everything is as far as what they're looking at and how long suspensions are for everything.
The late New Zealand running coach Arthur Lydiard has been honoured by the International Athletics Federation with a heritage plaque in the Legend category. Arthur Lydiard's groundbreaking system of training produced record-breaking runners, including Sir Murray Holberg, Sir Peter Snell, Barry McGee and John Davies. McGee says Lydiard revolutionised middle and long-distance coaching.
Without Arthur Lydiard, there would have been no 6 Olympic medals for us Kiwis or the 17 world records that were set. Nobody can explain what genius is, but Lydiard was a genius of a coach. I mean, if Lydiard said anything to you, it was like God speaking, really.
Barry McGee. Arthur Lydiard died in 2004. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the debut of a new comedy series, Killjoy, because sometimes the true crime podcast genre is too serious to take seriously. Country Life catches up with a team of Siberian Huskies somewhere near Wairuru, where conditions are often perfect. We've got more live performances from Silver Scroll Awards past, and in honour of the element rubidium, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the colour purple on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel and Central High Country, occasional showers becoming few and far between tomorrow with increasing fine spells. Bay of Plenty, isolated showers clearing by mid-evening, mainly fine tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers tonight, fine tomorrow, apart from cloud about Tararua district. Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine, but the chance of a shower. Bulla and Westland, occasional showers turning to rain in Westland tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, periods of rain, heavy falls possible from late tomorrow morning. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine with high cloud at times, a few showers about Stewart Island tonight, but rain spreading north to southern Otago tomorrow. Rain easing to showers tomorrow evening. And for Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Dinosaurs thought they had time too. That's just one of the many messages from young activists marching to motivate older generations to actually do something about climate change. Tens of thousands hit the streets around the country in the third and largest school strike this year. The marches have been inspired by 16-year-old climate change activist Greta Thunberg, who was this week at the United Nations delivering a blistering attack. She accused global leaders of stealing her dreams and her childhood with their empty words. We begin our coverage in Auckland, where Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Munro joined hundreds of students from South Auckland who wanted the world to know their message.
This is our fight as much as it is anyone else's.
When Ainganga Lefele Fepuleai Tapua'i stood on the steps of Aotea Square today, it was the result of months of work by her and her schoolmates.
In 20 years' time, we want to be able to go back to our homelands. We want to be able to bury our parents in the villages they grew up in.
Feli wasn't at the last strike. It fell on the same day as Polyfest, so like many of her classmates, she was busy. But their voices were front and centre today.
We are not drowning. Our islands are sinking. but we are not drowning.
Philly's day got off to an early start. She helped organise 5 buses to bring in students from colleges across South Auckland for the march.
And what we did is organise these buses so that kids on Southside who wanted to come to the strike but didn't have a way to get out here because it's so far were able to come. It may not be within the means of everyone financially to go vegan or buy an electric car. And it's like, how can we spark climate action without excluding minority groups?
Representing their countries and their cultures, the 200-plus students spent evenings painting signs made from boxes and spreading the word about climate change and its consequences.
Climate change work can be really privileged, can be a very elite space sometimes. When you think about the norm that people, when they think of a climate activist, do they think of a white person before they think of a brown person or an indigenous person? It's like acknowledging that climate change action has been an indigenous practice for so many years, an integral part of Pacifica culture. So that's been really important, trying to connect everyone back to that.
A message all too familiar for those marching with her today.
Can you tell me about your sign? So this one is Cook Island. I'm Cook Island, and this is Enwa Manea, and so it means like to have beautiful land. And so with the sea levels rising and the rubbish polluting the ocean, it's hard to keep our home clean.
Why is it important for you to be here?
Because if we don't have our land and if we don't have a future, we have no education.
We think it's very vital to spread the message that climate change is going to basically kill us.
We're drawing the line here that we won't let our islands drown, and by saving our islands, we really are saving the world.
The group joined thousands of people in Aotea Square, which filled to capacity with protesters, with singing, chanting and speeches.
Today, we draw the line!
Students in life jackets represented the drowning planet. Others had brought a life raft.
It's the end of the line, and we really need help, and we need politicians to do something now. It's time for action.
Signs celebrated climate activist Greta Thunberg. They demanded a climate emergency be declared. Some included a few expletives, and others warned there's no planet B.
Yeah, I'm so proud of our people. Our people came out, we showed out.
It's a huge improvement since the past strikes, and it's, as you can see, it's incredibly moving as well, because all these people are here to fight for a future, and we're all here united together, and it's just incredible to see this many people.
Thousands of Auckland school children, their parents and grandparents have brought downtown Auckland to a complete standstill as they make their way down Queen Street to the waterfront. Their message is clear and it is very loud. They want urgent action on climate change. As they say, they're fighting for their future, the future of future generations and those Pacific nations which are already feeling the effects of climate change the hardest. Leading the charge down Queen Street, Philly says there can't be any doubt anymore around what needs to be done to save the planet.
What is your message to all of these people? This was our dream. Yeah. You'll see. You'll see.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands rallied in other centres too today. Some of the biggest crowds were in Wellington, where the demonstration was reported to be one of the largest in living memory. Katie Scotcher has more.
The organisers of today's climate strike estimate 170,000 people hit the streets demanding climate justice. And this time it wasn't just students. Parents, grandparents, professionals and some politicians joined in too. Down south, roughly 9,000 people marched to Dunedin's Octagon, chanting for climate justice and the end of fossil fuel exploration. Protesters say it's not just their future they're fighting for.
It's hard to think of having a future where I can have a family and kids if it's not going to be safe. Young people really need to voice their concerns because I think the older generation are not doing enough.
We feel that we all have to look at the way we live for this carbon culture and we have to do something about it. The best thing is by your own example.
I've got 4 kids. I want them to have the future that I've been able to have.
Further up the east coast in Christchurch, thousands filled the city's Cathedral Square. 15-year-old high school student Nellie Manning says she wants a future that isn't determined by the state of the environment. She has a clear message for political leaders around the country.
Please listen to us. It's our future that's on the line here. I don't think our demands are unreasonable. They're doable, and not just doable, they're necessary.
We want change. We want it now.
At the top of the South Island, more than 2,000 gathered at the church steps in central Nelson. Giant papier-mâché puppets stood head and shoulders above the placards before the procession went down the main street. 73-year-old Eileen of the group Climate Grands says it's time to get serious.
I'm here today because I really feel we as the adults recognise that fossil fuels are no longer the option, and we need to seriously say we're not using them anymore.
A crowd of up to 40,000 wended its way through Wellington's central city, one of the day's larger demonstrations, and one of the largest in living memory, according to the local council. It was led by a group of young Pacific Islanders called the Pacific Climate Warriors. They were led by Mary Mo'onokolio, who was astounded by the turnout.
Actually, I'm so amazed by this turnout. It's definitely more than we had last time, but I think because we've made it an intergenerational march and we're fighting for our Pacific people, that's what's made it for all these people to come out and stand as one, standing in solidarity no matter what island we come from, what we speak, just coming together.
Another student, 22-year-old Tagi Whanō, says it's time to act now.
Just like our chants are saying, we're not drowning, we're definitely fighting. So just here to support that and to let them know, let the government know that, we're not giving up regardless. Yeah.
The strike's organisers are demanding the government declares a climate emergency and then implements the appropriate policies. They are also hoping to see cross-party consensus on the zero carbon bill and a promise to end fossil fuel exploration. An open letter setting out those demands, with more than 11,000 signatures, was delivered to Parliament this afternoon. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
It is about 17 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Let us know if you went along for the march today. Are you a school student or someone else? Did you take time off work to be there and why? 2101, you can reach us on the text or tweet us, Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A man who stole guns and drugs from a police station said he wanted to raise money to bring his children to New Zealand after he was deported from Australia. The police were left red-faced after Alan James Harris stole firearms from a supposedly secure area of the Palmerston North Police Station in April. He was sentenced in the Palmerston North District Court today. Our reporter Jonathan Mitchell was there.
Harris was walking past the police station on Anzac Day when he looked over the fence and saw a garage door was open. He kicked down a door to the exhibits room and took 26 firearms, some ammunition and some cannabis outside, putting them over a fence into a property next door. But he was interrupted by police when he came to load the guns into his car, making his escape with 9 firearms, as well as ammunition and cannabis. In court today, Judge Lance Rowe referred to Alan Harris's convictions in Australia and his subsequent deportation back to New Zealand in 2016. He told Harris he needs to have a hard think about his behaviour and reconnect with his Māori roots.
And although you've served terms of imprisonment before, including quite a long stretch in Australia for an aggravated robbery, I don't know how much anyone has looked at where you're from and what led you to this point and what you were exposed to as a child. But it is time for people to look at that. And it's time for you to look at that too, Mr. Harris.
The judge said Harris has 5 children in Australia and desperately wanted to get money to fly them over here.
This placed you in a position of some despair. So when you saw the opportunity to steal, and in fact you were looking over the fence to see if there was something you could steal, your motivation was to try and get money in relation to your kids.
Crown Prosecutor Carl van der Plas said a pre-sentence report outlined Harris's gloating about the crime.
He indicates that he's perceived as a legend or a superstar and that this was an opportunity for him to stick it to the cops, which in my submission indicates that there is a lack of insight and remorse for the offender.
But Harris's lawyer, Mike Ryan, also quoted from the report, outlining his client's personality.
There are mischievous aspects to Mr. Harris's character.
Also a propensity to make the best of a bad situation, perhaps ingrained from an early age.
Harris's raid led to a nationwide audit looking at the security of firearms at police stations. He was sentenced to 2 years and 3 months in prison for burglary. He was also sentenced for breaches to community work and release conditions. One of the guns he stole has still not been recovered. In Palmerston North for Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell, 10-8.
In an act of defiance, the National Party has refused to take down its attack ads featuring footage from Parliament TV. Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, gave National a deadline of 5 p.m. today to pull the ads that feature clips of Labour MPs. National had promised to take down the ads, but about 20 minutes ago announced it wouldn't be complying with the ruling. Shadow Leader of the House, Jerry Brownlee, is on the line now. Mr. Brownlee, what's changed?
We don't believe the Speaker's actually got the authority to order the takedown.
So yesterday when you said you would take them down, when the party agreed to take them down, had you not done all your homework then?
At that stage, I said that we would comply with the requirements of the Speaker. The Speaker has to work on some authority. What we've now worked out is that actually the Speaker could have sent this matter to the Privileges Committee to be determined. He could have determined that there was a matter of privilege in that event. He hasn't done that. So you can't, it's not like he could put in place some kind of interim injunction. He doesn't have that authority.
Well, that's what he said, isn't it? That this is an interim measure until the Standing Orders Committee meets again to debate the issue.
Yeah, what's the basis of his authority?
So are you saying that the Speaker's made a mistake?
Look, I'm saying that this is a deliberate attempt to shut down what was very effective communication, using the words of members of Parliament in a way that is readily disseminated to the public.
So it's a partisan decision by the Speaker?
I'm not saying that. I'm not making any comment about the Speaker. You've asked me to talk about our decision. I've just told you what our decision is.
So these are... Well, you agree that these are ads?
No. I think that's another point of...
what are they if they're not ads?
Well, what is, for example, Hansard, the Record of Parliament? Is that an advertising magazine? Look, I don't think anyone who is speaking in Parliament should have the expectation that what they say is not going to be in the public arena. The debating chamber should be the most open forum in the country. And we, after all, have a government that often trumpets how much they want to be open and transparent.
It's not an issue about their comments being reported or used. Isn't it about whether it's used in a commercial setting, in a commercial advertisement? Those are the rules. So how are these little videos? How are these little videos not advertisements?
Well, you've got it wrong. So the point here is that the standing orders do allow for parody, for satire, and for derision. And any speech in Parliament can be cut, rearranged, spliced in, whatever you like, by any media outlet in this country if they so choose. But apparently, if you are in the Parliament, you can't even report what actually people are saying.
No, Mr. Brownlee, the rules are, as you know, that they cannot be used.
Please, I've been in Parliament a very long time.
I know you have. And I'm reading...
I sat on the Standing Orders Committee last time.
And I'm reading from the rules now, Mr. Brownlee, so can we just address this together? So I'm reading from the rules now that the reports that use extracts of coverage and proceedings and purport to be summaries must be fair and accurate. So are the way in which those little snippets that National has made, are they fair and accurate?
What is inaccurate in them? They are verbatim. There's no commentary over the top of them.
Are they in context?
They are in context because they're only presented in the context of the topic that was being discussed. If you take the case of Deborah Russell, she was explaining to the nation what the government's view of well-being is. We haven't made any comment other than saying this is what she was saying.
When you cut a clip of Phil Twyford from the House saying, here's the big lie, up against another clip where he's talking about promising 100,000 homes under Kiwi Build, was Mr Twyford suggesting that the 100,000 homes was the big lie, or have you put those things two disparate comments together to make it seem like he was?
Well, it depends on who has actually done that, and I'm not familiar with that particular video. But let me tell you that if your
So
organisation
are you saying
or
that
any other
National didn't
outside
make
media
that video?
organisation did it, no, I'm not saying that. Because it'd be a good idea if just let me say something. What I'm saying is that any media organisation in the country can do that at will and not incur any sort of penalty. Now, all I will say is that the comments that are in any videos that we are putting up that have our political opponents making a comment in them are comments that they have made. And that's
But the rules require those comments to be used in a fair and accurate way, and that's the point that I'm exploring with you. The editing of these clips, I'm asking you if they're fair and accurate. I've presented you an example where clearly Mr Twyford is not referring to his 100,000 Kiwi-build houses as a big lie, but those two clips have been put together to make it seem like he is. So is that fair and accurate?
Well, let's put some context around what you're saying, because what he was attempting to say was to suggest that, and I can't remember what the topic was, that there was some big lie from National. What we then countered that with was, well, what about your Kiwi build? I mean, look, it's in the end, parody, satire and derision are allowed in the use of this material by any media outlet in this country.
Yes, but not an accurate, but not an accurate editing. So also the commercial sponsorship or commercial advertising again.
No, we're going back to that. We're going back on that because you are wrong on that. There is no prohibition on media using snippets from Parliament in a way that might be considered to be parody. Or satire.
I'm not talking about that, Mr Brownlee. I'm talking about, it says summaries must be fair and accurate. So that's what I was asking you about, whether the way in which you've used them are fair and accurate representations. Why not just take them down and then go to the standing orders, go to the committee and thrash it out there? Why not take them down in the meantime until it can be sorted out? Take the high ground.
So we should accept that the Speaker has the right to veto what we are able to communicate to the rest of the country. Let's be clear, that process would take months. It could even be frustrated well into next year. And that effectively means that this is a gagging attempt by the Speaker. But I'm going back to what I said before. We don't believe he's got the authority to do that.
So what do you do now then? What happens next?
Nothing. We just carry on the way we have been.
And wait for the Speaker to, what, hold you in contempt?
Well, what will he do?
I'm asking you.
That's for you to ask him. No, I'm not predicting what he's going to do. I think that's a good question for him.
Have you taken legal advice on this?
Look, we've made our decision today after we've considered the best way to progress from our perspective.
Appreciate your time today. That's the Shadow Leader of the House, Jerry Brownlee from National there, saying that, well, they're not going to take down those ads and they're going to wait and see what happens. Donald Trump is attacking the whistleblower, accusing him of trying to get a foreign power to intervene in next year's presidential election. He tweeted that they acted with zero info and a known bias. And in an audio recording of a conversation with staff from the United States mission, compared the situation to treason. But the whistleblower has been defended by the Acting Director of National Intelligence, Joseph Maguire, who testified today before the House Intelligence Committee that they were acting in good faith. The ABC's Connor Duffy reports.
As a nation watched on, 36-year Navy SEAL veteran and Director of National Intelligence Joseph Maguire appeared before Congress for a different kind of battle. Minutes earlier, a whistleblower report alleging the White House sought to solicit interference in the 2020 election from a foreign power was made public. Its description of a phone call between President Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky matched the transcript released yesterday, showing President Trump asking for an investigation of his main rival, Joe Biden, when the question of military aid was raised. The complaint alleges this request was made multiple times, and Democratic Congressman and Chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, says it also alleges the White House tried to hide the communications.
The complaint goes further, obviously, than the record of the call, in that it also alleges that there were efforts made to conceal this scheme by moving communications onto servers that were designed for an entirely different purpose.
The ranking Republican on the committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, says it's all a conspiracy between Democrats and the media.
The Department of Justice investigated the complaint and determined no action was warranted. The Ukrainian president denies being pressured by President Trump. So once again, this supposed scandal ends up being nothing like what we were told.
That was undermined, though, when Director of Intelligence Maguire was asked about whether he supported a watchdog's assessment that the whistleblower is credible.
Can we at least agree that the Inspector General made a sound conclusion that this whistleblower complaint was credible?
That is correct.
Mr. Maguire also says the whistleblower acted lawfully. When asked about President Trump's accusation, the complainant was a partisan operative.
You don't believe the whistleblower is a political hack, do you, Director?
I believe that, as I said before, Mr. Chairman, I believe the whistleblower is operating in good faith.
As he returned to Washington, D.C. from the UN General Assembly, President Trump slammed the hearing.
What these guys are doing, Democrats are doing to this country, is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Democrats, though, say they won't stop until President Trump is impeached, with Congressman Schiff hailing the whistleblower as a hero.
Now, this matter would not have come to the attention of our committee or the nation's attention without the courage of a single person, the whistleblower.
One man's hero is another's traitor, though, and the New York Times reported the president told a group of diplomats spies used to be treated very differently.
That's the ABC's Connor Duffy. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, our WINS officers a postcode lottery when it comes to getting help. Christchurch councillor Dion Swiggs is about to speak out for the first time since allegations of inappropriate behaviour emerged. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know whether you think parliamentary footage should be used for commercial advertising. Should it be a free-for-all? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now with Susanna.
The National Party has defied the Speaker's ruling all political attack ads with edited parliamentary TV footage had to be removed by 5 p.m. Every National Party MP will post a video on social media in breach of Trevor Mallard's ruling, potentially putting the entire caucus in contempt of Parliament. The Labour Party filed a complaint over the footage being used without MPs' permission and in a misleading way. Thousands of adults joined tens of thousands of students in the streets across the country today, calling for definitive action on climate change. More than 40 youth-led events were held in cities and towns as part of worldwide Strike for Climate events. Organisers estimate 170,000 protesters turned out in total, demanding those in power take action. For many of those marching, the Pacific Islands represent ground zero in the fight against climate change. Young Pacific Islanders, calling themselves the Pacific Climate Warriors, led a crowd estimated at 30,000 through Wellington. The group's leader, Mary Moiono Korleo, was astounded by the turnout, saying they made it an intergenerational march where people can stand together as one. A man who stole guns and drugs from a police station was desperate to get money to see his children. Alan James Harris was charged with burglary after the guns, including an illegal semi-automatic weapon, were taken from a secure area of the Palmerston North station in April. At the Palmerston North District Court this afternoon, Judge Lance Rowe sentenced Harris to 2 years and 3 months in prison for burglary. Auckland police are still trying to identify a second man they believe was involved in a sexual attack on a woman in the city last Friday. A 62-year-old man was arrested yesterday in Tauranga and appeared in the city's district court this morning. He's charged with the abduction and sexual violation of a 17-year-old. The 49-year-old man the police were seeking in the Eastern and Bay of Plenty districts has been arrested. He is due to appear in Rotorua District Court tomorrow. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time now for business news with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. Consumer confidence is still in the doldrums, eh?
Yes, and it has been for a while, hasn't it? But there's a bit of a contradiction in this particular survey, and we've seen this in others as well, where the overall confidence generally is down. So we're down, 4 more points. So it's low, and it's been low for a while. On the other hand, there's some glimmer of hope that perhaps consumers might be willing to spend, at least when it comes to household items. So they're thinking, more people are thinking it's a good time to buy. That could be because the interest rate story is kind of flowing through. So maybe they're saying, well, maybe we can buy. Interest rates are low, going to stay lower for longer. We heard that earlier this week from the Reserve Bank governor. Perhaps.
So why are we all feeling so sad, Zaki, then?
Well, it's not surprising. I mean, it's a reflection of what we're seeing globally. I mean, there's so much unsettled news, with Brexit, the trade dilemma between China and the United States and how that's flowing through into other kinds of areas. The impeachment going on in the United States, that sent a bit of a wave through the markets today. All that sort of stuff reflects back, I think, onto how people are feeling more generally about the economy. It does wear people down, I think. Yeah, and we haven't really had any very positive news for a long time.
Okay, so fashion retailer, this is Hallenstein Glassons. They've had a modest upward tweak in sales.
It has.
How modest?
It's pretty modest. Now, I have to say, it rose 6%, which isn't bad, but it was mostly because of their Australian sales and online sales, and also sales of women's garments. So I guess people like to spend money on clothes still. I don't know. Have you been shopping recently, Lisa, doing your bit for the economy?
Probably no, I haven't had enough time. But it's the women who are doing the spending then,
yes,
in
it
terms
seems
of
it
the
is the
uptick.
women. Yes, it's mostly the women's fashions. Interesting. So I don't know what's going to happen next. We're leading into Christmas. It remains to be seen how that's going to perk up the economy, if at all. We're hoping, though, because overall, if people aren't spending any money, it makes it difficult for retailers and others hospitality and other industries to make a living.
What else has been going on the markets today?
Well, not a lot, to be honest. It's been fairly quiet. Again, I guess people are absorbing what's going on in the United States. That really is a big factor in what happens in our local market. But we closed up 14 points to 10,837, so on a positive note. The New Zealand dollar is steady, just below 63 cents US at 62.9.
We're always hovering in that zone, aren't we?
Yeah, we're hovering there, 93.1 Australian, so still reasonably...
And 50 pence?
51
pence.
51 pence, there you go.
There you go. Thank you, Nona. Appreciate it. Nona Peltier with our business wrap there. Beneficiaries who request emergency grants to cover basics like food and rent say they face a postcode lottery around the level of help they can get from their local work and income office. Hardship grants have rocketed over the past year. The number of special needs grants nearly doubled between June last year and this year. But as Nita Blake-Person reports, the help people receive varies depending on which office they visit.
It's been 18 months since Nicole, which is not her real name, moved from Auckland to Huntly with her 2 sons. They had nothing at the time and have been sleeping on mattresses on the floor in their rented home ever since. But after becoming increasingly concerned about her family's health, she approached the local work and income office to request an emergency grant to pay for some new beds and sheets. Already in more than $4,000 of debt to work and income, the staff there recommended she visit the Salvation Army to get some free furniture. But she says what she found there was no better than what she already had, and decided to head to Mangere to get support from an advocate and to try again to get the bedding she was after.
Oh, yeah, it was just frustrating. A long day with my baby too. It only takes like an hour to get to Mangere. But then having to find the furniture there as well, and then having to not get accepted again. When I went to Mangere, because of Huntly branch, they told me that they can't approve of me getting beds and furniture.
That second decline came despite her having social worker Alistair Russell there to help her.
And she was declined that assistance because she had, according to work and income, no available advance left and a larger debt. That is completely inappropriate and ignores a clear ministerial directive which gives work and income the ability to ignore how much debt she has and ignore how much advances she has left and meet the family's immediate needs.
Nicole says the travel required to get to Mangere only to be turned down again is frustrating.
And my boy, he goes to school here in Huntly. So I had to leave him here with my sister, which she works. It makes it harder as well. So I don't want my boy to take any days off school.
Work and Income says its staff were concerned that Nicole would get into further debt by giving her the loan and had asked her to come back into the Huntly office if she couldn't find what was needed. Nicole's since been given a grant to buy beds for her family, but Alistair Russell says the fact she was declined in one office and felt she needed to go elsewhere to get help shows the varied service that Work and Income clients receive across the country. In the year to June, more than 1.6 million hardship grants were given out across New Zealand, but there are discrepancies when it comes to which office will grant what. Decline rates are highest in Canterbury, where 5.5% of all applications are turned down. That's followed by Bay of Plenty at 4.8%. Taranaki has the best region-wide approval ratings, with decline rates of just 2.2%. But ratings also vary within regions. If you're in Auckland, the offices with the lowest approval rating is in Helensville and highest in Manurewa.
Despite statements from the Minister and from the Prime Minister that things have changed at Work and Income, the reality is very different.
Northland housing advocate Carol Peters says while some offices are improving, others still do not give the full entitlement unless there's an advocate there. But she says Work and Income shouldn't have any hesitancy helping people.
Already their incomes are extremely low, and people that I see often only have $23 to $30 or some $70 to live on and feed a family because of the high rents and the other high expenses and the low rate of benefit. So when someone comes for an emergency benefit, we really need to take that seriously.
In a statement, the Ministry for Social Development spokesperson Kay Reid says there's very little variation in the approval ratings of different Work and Income offices. In the year to June, there was an approval rating across the country of more than 96%. She says every day they speak to around 28,000 people to make sure they get what they're entitled to. And while people's individual circumstances are different, that's taken into account when they come in for help. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
Under siege, Christchurch councillor Dion Swiggs has addressed the media for the first time since allegations of inappropriate behaviour emerged. 3 complainants, aged between 13 and 21 at the time, say that Dion Swiggs engaged in grossly inappropriate late-night messaging on social media on numerous occasions and insisted on hugs instead of handshakes. He has denied all allegations of misconduct. Mr Swiggs released a statement on Monday saying he would take a break from council duties and campaigning while an investigation into the allegations were carried out. The media conference has just wrapped up and our reporter Alicia Foon is there. Kia ora, Alicia. What did Dion Swiggs have to say?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, it was a swift minute of a media statement. He continues to deny all claims of gross misconduct. He says he's been left with no choice but to speak publicly. He said he had not responded to dozens of requests for comment out of respect for everyone involved in the process. He said he needed to voice his disappointment at the slow progress on the council's initial assessment of the complaints. Yes, he continues to deny all claims of gross misconduct and looks forward to receiving all of the information in order to answer the accusations. He says critically he has not been told who was behind the complaints, and he did not want the complainants publicly identified either. He said he'd support their name suppression, but needed to know that they could respond to their claims. He said it was unreasonable, and he would not expect anyone to not have the chance of a fair hearing. He said it was a critical time in the election cycle and it was important that voters were able to make their decisions based on factual information. He said he wanted to thank as well people who had shown him support through the challenging time. It was extremely swift. He answered no comments afterwards and very kind of brief answers from his PR team were answered, but unfortunately no real answers from Dion today.
Did he say, Alicia, he is obviously continuing to stand in the election, just taking a short break at the moment?
He is taking a short break. We'll be back in Monday. So no, he will not be resigning. He will continue to stand for this election cycle.
Thanks for that, Alicia. That's our reporter, Alicia Foon, who's just been at that press conference with Dion Swiggs. It is almost 5:45. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Australian politician behind a new law legalising cannabis is advising New Zealanders to be pragmatic in next year's referendum. And remember, there's a huge range of options when it comes to allowing marijuana. Australian Capital Territory, that includes Canberra and a few surrounding towns, has voted to legalise small amounts of cannabis for personal use. The new law doesn't kick in until January next year. But already the Aussie Home Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton's come out swinging, saying it's unconscionable and dangerous, suggesting central government might try and weed out the new law. The Labour MP for Yarrabee, Michael Peterson, was behind the private member's bill to legalise, and I asked him what the new law will mean.
My private member's bill legalises the possession of 50 grams of cannabis. It allows people to possess 2 plants to a household limit of 4.
So why did you settle on those quantities?
Well, they're for the most part a cut and copy of our current decriminalisation framework that's in place in the ACT. And what decriminalisation actually means is that whilst cannabis is illegal in the ACT under these laws, the previous laws, for most people who are caught with small amounts of cannabis, they would receive a fine. But not everyone did. Some people caught with small amounts of cannabis in the ACT received a criminal conviction, which would hamper their ability to get certain jobs, to travel outside of Australia, and for some people ultimately led to jail time. And I don't think those punishments are in line with what most people think is the right response to small amounts of cannabis.
So do you reckon a couple of plants and 50 grams a person is just, well, a fair amount for personal use? That's what you're aiming for with this law?
I think it's a pretty reasonable amount. The most common amount of cannabis that's purchased by users is an ounce, which is 28 grams. So a 50-gram limit seems pretty reasonable to me.
And what safeguards are there around it? Age limits? What's the deal with driving? Any rules around how you ingest it?
It's a really good question. There are absolutely no changes to our drug driving laws. It remains illegal to drive under the influence of drugs. There are no changes to the laws for minors. Minors cannot and should not use cannabis.
So by minor, you mean under the age of 18?
Correct.
So how did you manage to get this through?
Good question. I first introduced this bill late last year, and it's been a bit of a process to get to this point, and it was a bit of a process to get to that point. In bringing forward my bill, I worked with my Labor Party colleagues to get them on board and then bring it forward. And then from the process, from the point of having introduced the bill to the wider community, there was a big community debate that stretched for nearly a year. But that community debate has actually been quite supportive. In the ACT, 54% of Canberrans support legalising cannabis, with only 27% opposed. So the community debate has been a very sensible one, which has made this final passage of the bill actually pretty straightforward.
So we're having discussions around cannabis here in New Zealand at the moment, and there's a call to have a debate that's based on facts. I'm just wondering, is that what happened in your neck of the woods, or what was kind of some of the stuff that was thrown up at you as to reasons why you shouldn't do this?
I don't want to put the words in the mouths of the opposition, but some of the common things that people bring forward is that it will increase cannabis usage, or that it will provide further opportunities to organised criminal gangs. A lot of these arguments don't really stack up when you take a proper look at them. What we're simply trying to do in the ACT is address the criminality experienced by the individual consumer.
So you wanted people to avoid having a serious criminal conviction that would, ruin their chances for the rest of their lives, or potentially. You wanted to get rid of that barrier with this legislation.
Yes. It's important to point out that there are really two main elements of criminality when you talk about drug law. There's the criminality experienced by the individual. There's also the criminality of the black market. This private members bill solely addresses the criminality experienced by the individual consumer. It does not go to addressing, for the most part, the wider issue of a black market that funds organised crime.
Interesting thing is, this doesn't come in actually until January of next year, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and already the Home Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton, is kicking up about it. So is there a possibility you won't even get out of the starting gate with it?
No, I think there's been a lot of huff and puff from the Commonwealth Government, but there's also been a lot of mixed messaging. The Commonwealth Health Minister came out on the same day and said that the legalisation of cannabis was an issue for states and territories, not for the Commonwealth Government. The Commonwealth Government could try and interfere in these laws in one notable way, and that would be to change the Self-Government Act for the Australian Capital Territory. This has occurred in the past when the Northern Territory in Australia passed assisted dying a couple of decades ago. The Commonwealth Government came in and changed the Self-Government Acts for the territories to remove our ability to legislate on that issue. They could try to do the same thing here, but it would require an Act of Parliament to pass through both chambers of the federal parliament.
So I'm wondering, so ACT is pretty small, right? So do you imagine people will kind of trot in there to have a doobie or what?
Well, I don't think so. Under this model, it's still illegal to sell cannabis. So you're not going to be seeing recreational cannabis stores pop up. For the most part, people in Canberra that want to use cannabis have already been using cannabis. We're not creating a particularly effective supply chain for people here. So I don't think there'll be a green tourism, as they call it.
Yeah. Hey, are you going to take advantage of the new laws when it comes in?
I'm one of the 1 in 3 Australians that have used cannabis in their lifetime, but I'm a pretty straight-laced politician, so I'm quite boring. So no, but I do suspect some people will.
What advice might you have for us as we head into a referendum next year?
I would encourage everyone to have an open mind and be very pragmatic in the proposals that get considered. Cannabis legalisation is not one monolithic idea. There are lots of different models in place. The model that we've put in place here in the ACT is quite similar to Vermont in the United States of America. It's not like Colorado where you've got retail dispensary stores, and it's not like Canada where you've got government-run dispensaries. Each jurisdiction needs to have a look at what's suitable for their goals and what they're trying to address, and hopefully you can come up with some sensible solutions for your community.
So you're basically saying it's not kind of, well, it's not a simple yes or no question. There are tons of options along the spectrum. You don't have to entirely throw open the floodgates if you want to go ahead with this.
Completely. The idea that there's only one form of cannabis legalisation is just wrong. There's lots of different ways that you can address cannabis in your community. Some go the whole hog and have retail dispensaries with advertising in the community. Some jurisdictions have pursued a pathway where there's only government-run dispensaries. Some jurisdictions have gone the path of only allowing community gardens called cannabis clubs to grow cannabis, and some jurisdictions have done what we're looking at doing here in the ACT, where we're simply allowing the individual to possess and grow small amounts.
And that's Australian Labor MP for Yerrabi, Michael Peterson. It's been a very unsettling couple of days for MPs in the UK, with Parliament's Speaker describing the current environment there as toxic. Today, the former Prime Minister, John Major, has lambasted Boris Johnson for provoking fear and anger and fuelling grievances against Parliament and the rule of law in his pursuit of Brexit. Meanwhile, one of Boris Johnson's closest aides says he's confident the UK will leave the EU on October 31st, but its chief negotiator says opposition MPs have put measures in place to stop a no deal. Here's the BBC's Norman Smith.
Despite the anger among opposition MPs and the alarm among some Tories, the Prime Minister and his supporters have not backed down. Far from seeking to calm tempers, his aides told reporters that it was Parliament that was to blame. This building is taking a wrecking ball to basic democratic politics, said one. Others pointed to the language used by opposition MPs to describe the Prime Minister, such as dictator and tyrant. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister himself refused to appear before MPs to answer an urgent Commons question about his use of language, sending instead a junior minister. And this afternoon, Mr Johnson waved away calls to apologise.
I totally deplore any threats to anybody, particularly female MPs. And a lot of work is being done to stop that and to give people the security that they need. Okay. But I do think it's important that in the House of Commons I should be able to talk about the Surrender Bill and the Surrender Act in the way that I did.
A number of female MPs today also spoke of the hostility and threats they'd faced, they claimed, as a result of the Prime Minister's confrontational approach. Among them, the Labour MP Jess Phillips.
I have had a death threat this week, not online, literally posted to my place of work where my staff work, that says, to quote Boris Johnson, it literally says those words, people like you who don't support Brexit will be found dead in a ditch. So what has happened to me, that death threat, that's collateral damage to him because all he's trying to do is win votes with fear.
But supporters of the Prime Minister accused Remain backing MPs of deliberately trying to whip up outrage to damage Mr Johnson. The suspicion of many at Westminster is that Mr Johnson's abrasive approach is deliberate, designed to goad opposition MPs into triggering a no-confidence vote. His team also clearly believe the combative language chimes with voters angry at the deadlock in Parliament. Critics fear, though, it risks cementing the already deep divisions in the country over Brexit.
And that's the BBC's Norman Smith. It is about 5 minutes away from 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. The All Blacks have had a day off at the Rugby World Cup in Japan, making way for much-needed downtime between games. Coach Steve Hansen, a former policeman himself, played copper for the day when he was made honorary police chief of the city of Beppu. While some of the players went for a round of golf, others checked out the famous black sand bath on Beppu Beach. Now, rugby reporter Joe Porter, who always asks the tough questions, caught up with front rowers Joe Moody and Cody Taylor. Now, he wanted to find out how they're coping with the heat and how the sand bath went.
The other boys really enjoyed it. Me personally, I don't deal with the heat too well. I'm not very good in saunas and all that sort of thing, so I couldn't stay in there for very long.
Not doing well in the heat must be making it hard for Moody, with temperatures hovering close to 30 degrees and the air thick and sticky with humidity near 100%. Hooker Cody Taylor is also battling.
We had the day off yesterday, but before that we got put through our paces quite a bit and done a bit of mahi, and the heat's still getting to us a little bit.
Moody says in the oppressive heat, the front rowers have to be careful not to lose too much weight.
It's good to have a little bit of extra cushion for the pushing, but like you say, it's good to have a little bit there for, taking those contacts and bumps and bruises and that.
Though with a delicious array of Japanese cuisine on offer, Taylor says it's not proving too hard to maintain the calorie intake.
We've had pretty amazing food. Japan, they know how to cook a feed, so it's been unreal. Sushi and sashimi and all that, which is quite nice. And the boys have made a pig of themselves the other night at a yakiniku, which was quite nice. And I think Joe would have put about 2 kilos of beef. So yeah, those skinnies might have risen, I'd say, in the last couple of days.
The All Blacks now turn their attention to feasting on Canada when they play their second pool game next Wednesday in Oita. In Beppu, mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Joe Porter aho.
And before we get to the news at 6, some feedback here. A lot of you getting in touch about National defying the Speaker's ruling to take down attack ads. This one says, National's attack ads showing edited, distorted versions of government MPs' question time answers typify the low functioning of National MPs and their supporters. They evidently believe in fighting dirty and lying to gain support. They present as desperate, pathetic and ethically bankrupt. Their belief that they are fit to govern New Zealand is laughable. And Louise has got in contact to say, just listening to the reports of the young people marching against climate change and then to the interview with Jerry Brownlee, I can't help wondering who are the adults here, says Louise. Lynn has also got in touch saying, so while our children were behaving like responsible adults fighting for our future, the National Party was adopting the tactics of Trump and Johnson of ignoring parliamentary rules and using ugly personal attacks that manipulate electronic records to distort the truth. Dee from Wellington has also got in contact about the same issue, these so-called attack ads. Dee says MPs speak freely in the House. They do this for the specific purpose to carry out their daily parliamentary activities. They shouldn't be thinking their comments could be used in a different forum. Parliament TV should never be used for anything else than televising Parliament. And also we've had some feedback about the climate march. This one from someone who describes himself as pale, stale and male, saying his generation, either knowingly or not, caused the runaway climate change we experience now. I joined our local Hawke's Bay march and was hugely impressed with the drive and organisation of the young people involved, the heartfelt and clever signs they created. As most were below voting age, it falls on those of us who can to put the pressure on our elected representatives without delay or compromise.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. National Party MPs have defied the Speaker's orders to remove social media attack ads by 5 p.m. today, instead posting a video en masse just as the ban kicked in. Yesterday, Speaker Trevor Mallard ruled all political attack ads that contained edited parliamentary TV footage since the start of the year and without the MP's permission had to be taken down. It followed a complaint by Labour about an ad featuring MP Deborah Russell being mocked for linking ancient philosophers to the government's wellbeing budget. National MP and shadow leader of the House, Jerry Brownlee, told Checkpoint the party doesn't believe the Speaker has the authority to order the takedown.
The Speaker has to work on some authority. What we've now worked out is that actually the Speaker could have sent this matter to the Privileges Committee to be determined. He could have determined that there was a matter of privilege in that event. He hasn't done that.
The move potentially puts the caucus in contempt of Parliament. Jerry Brownlee says any move from here is up to the Speaker. Young Pacific climate warriors have a message for the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and other world leaders. You need to do more. And they say they are going to make sure the government fulfills that commitment. They were among tens of thousands who marched through New Zealand today calling for solutions to the climate crisis. The organiser School Strike for Climate NZ tweeted that it had received credible reports that 170,000 people were striking nationwide. Samoan student Brianna Fruin was among those who rallied in Auckland. Ms Fruin, who founded the 350 Pacific Climate Warriors, says they will continue to petition world leaders to ensure their policies reflect the group's mission.
Because we've made it an intergenerational march and we're fighting for our Pacific people, that's what's made it for all these people to come out and stand as one, standing in solidarity no matter what island we come from, what we speak, just coming together.
10-year-old Willow, marching with her mother in Wellington, said she wants to make a change. She says people are destroying a planet that doesn't belong to them, but to everyone. Christchurch councillor Dion Swig says he has not been told who has made allegations of inappropriate behaviour against him. 3 complainants, aged between 13 and 21 at the time, say the city councillor engaged in grossly inappropriate late-night messaging on social media on numerous occasions and insisted on hugs instead of handshakes. Speaking publicly for the first time since the allegations emerged, Mr Swigs has denied inappropriate behaviour but says out of respect for everyone involved, he has not commented until now. He told media he was disappointed with the slow progress on the council's initial assessment of the complaint. He says he is looking forward to receiving all the information so he can answer the allegations. Mr Swiggs says it is a critical time in the election cycle and voters should make decisions based on factual information. The number of people at Auckland Council earning 6 figures has grown by about 200 in the last financial year. The annual report shows more than 1,550 people earn over $100,000, about a fifth of all staff, and 25 of them earn over $360,000, 4 more people than last year. The council's head of corporate finance and property, Kevin Ramsey, says some people have been pushed into the 6-figure bands by their 2% cost of living pay increases, but he says the council also has to compete for skilled workers.
We've brought extra people on board, and some of the reasons is things like the natural environment, the water quality initiatives, which we've got targeted rates to fund. They require expertise to come in and actually implement those programs, and those people are costing us more than $100,000.
Auckland Council's Kevin Ramsey. Several Ihu Mātao protesters have been trespassed from Fletcher Building in Auckland. Police say they were told about 10 o'clock this morning a group had gathered peacefully outside Fletcher Building on Great South Road in Penrose. They say some on Fletcher's land were asked by officers to move onto the footpath. Several were then verbally trespassed. They left later in the morning. Ihu Mātao protest leader Pania Newton says this is the first time they've been trespassed from Fletcher's.
It was pretty nerve-wracking at the time, very surprised that we've been going there for the past 4.5 years. We've never had threat of arrest or trespassing. There was all of a sudden this increased police presence and increased security.
Pania Newton from Save Our Unique Landscape. Tonga's Parliament has elected a new Prime Minister to replace the late Prime Minister Akilisi Pohiva. Pohiva Tu'i-o-Netoa, the current Minister of Finance, has won convincingly with 15 votes, 7 more than the acting Prime Minister, Semisi Sika. Mr Tu'i-o-Netoa, a minister in the Pohiva government, earlier this week crossed the floor to form a new People's Party and gain support from a united group of nobles and independent MPs. In his speech before the election, Mr Tu'i-o-Netoa promised to bring unity to the politically divided nation. It's 6:05. How to cope with the extreme heat is the major talking point ahead of the World Athletics Championships starting in Doha tonight. 2 New Zealand athletes will be among those to get a taste of conditions early on, as Brenton Van Nistelrooy reports.
Commonwealth Games champion Julia Radcliffe is first up in women's hammer throw qualifying before teenage sprint sensation Edward Osei Nketiah lines up in the heats of the men's 100 metres. Both will be competing in temperatures approaching 40 degrees, but will have the benefit of being in an air-conditioned stadium. The same can't be said for those who will line up in the women's marathon, which, despite starting at midnight local time, will be raced in hot and humid conditions, with the mercury never dipping below 30 degrees and expected to feel like mid-40s. Call Brenton Van Nistelrooy Aho.
The Rally of New Zealand is set to return to the World Rally Championship calendar next year. Rally New Zealand is confident the Sports International Governing Body, the FIA, will tonight confirm the event is back on the WRC calendar for the first time since 2012. Tonga's National Rugby League is taking legal action against the government after its international registration was cancelled. The Rugby League International Federation has suspended the TNRL after Tonga's acting Prime Minister said it had lost the trust and support of the country. Earlier this month, the TNRL sacked coach Christian Wolff, leading to some players threatening to boycott upcoming tests. That's the news.
Coming up this Sunday night, Mātangi Rea with Morgan Godfrey, a series of candid interviews with former Māori politicians.
What was your proudest achievement?
Being brave. I was brave.
Join Mātangi Rea with Morgan Godfrey and Metiria Ture this Sunday night on Te Ahi Ka just after the 6 p.m. news on RNZ National. Find the entire video and podcast series on the podcast and series page at rnz.co.nz.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland all the way through to Kapiti, including Coromandel and Central High Country. Occasional showers becoming few and far between tomorrow with increasing fine spells. Bay of Plenty, isolated showers clearing by mid-evening. Mainly fine tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers tonight. Fine tomorrow, apart from cloud about the Tararua district. For Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine but the chance of a shower. Bulla and Westland, occasional showers turning to rain in Westland tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, periods of rain, heavy falls possible from late tomorrow morning. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine with high cloud at times, a few showers about Stewart Island tonight, but rain spreading north to southern Otago tomorrow. Rain easing to showers in the evening. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The third and biggest climate strike yet has taken place across the country today, with thousands marching for solutions to what they say is a crisis. And this time it wasn't just students. They were joined by older people and businesses. Many of the activists have been inspired by 16-year-old climate activist Greta Thunberg, who this week delivered a blistering attack at the United Nations. And Greta today tweeted about the New Zealand strikes. Our reporter Tom Furley and cameraman Dan Cook filed this report.
They arrived in their thousands, school uniforms mixed with dinosaur costumes and suits, all with the same goal, as Lily Cowan explains.
We're really passionate about global warming and we want to save the world.
It's the third major call to action led by the country's young people, many of whom, like Tim, were carrying signs saying there's no planet B.
The world's getting wrecked by us and we need to fix it now, before it gets irreversible.
They follow millions marching around the world in the last week, demanding leaders act to combat climate change. Luke Wejohn is one of the organisers in Auckland.
For starters, declaring a climate emergency to acknowledge and tell the truth about the urgency that this matter has. Then to transition our economy and our agricultural industry especially into a more sustainable future. And emphasising on a just transition for the workers. We need our government to support an ambitious and cross-party Zero Carbon Act. We need to honour our responsibility to our Pacific neighbours.
This time it's not just students who have rallied to the cause. As the movement's grown, parents, grandparents, teachers and businesses have been urged to join in. Margaret Merton turns 86 next month and says she helped make the mess.
If we want to leave a world for our children and grandchildren and other people's grandchildren and children to inherit, we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is and stop spending up on things that are polluting the earth, really. And I don't think it's going to come easy to people. I know it's not going to be easy for me, but we've just about decided we'll get an electric car because we've got old cars that pollute, And we're going to have to give up things like overseas travel. Well, one of my friends said, no way. But I think if we want a future for these kids that isn't horrific, I read a lot of science fiction when I was younger, and it was a good training for what could happen, I think.
The march down Queen Street was one of 40 events held throughout the country. In Dunedin, 9,000 people marched to the Octagon, chanting for climate justice. In Christchurch, thousands more made their way to Cathedral Square. In Wellington, an estimated 30,000 people joined the march through the central city to Parliament, in what the local council says could be the biggest march in living memory. Lisa Satherley missed the previous two climate marches, but joined her daughter today because she feels she felt the time has come to act.
I think just the momentum going all over the world, really. I'm from Norway, so next door to where Greta is from. And yes, it's just the momentum growing, and I felt I needed to be part of it.
Sridhar Ekambaram says he wants to show young people they are not alone in demanding faster action on climate change.
They are pretty brave. They are doing what we keep thinking we should be doing, but we are not taking it. We're not taking the effort to do it, but they are doing it. So they are brave, and they should be applauded for that.
The pressure continues to be put on leaders, some of whom are against the march. Earlier this week, Acting Prime Minister Winston Peters said young people were better off staying in school. Another organiser, Markale Parkinson, hopes today's turnout will force leaders to take action.
I hope so. I mean, if they don't, then what is democracy?
For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
And if you're just listening to that on the car home, do go back and have a look on our website at Dan Cook and Tom Furley's piece there. There's some fantastic, intelligent, clever and even funny placards in amongst the marches there. Auckland Council has had to recruit building inspectors from Canada as it fights to retain workers and keep up with the pace of building. The council released its annual report today, which shows it has the equivalent of 400 more full-time staff than it did at this time last year. And on top of that, they are earning more, with a larger proportion getting six figures. Rowan Quinn reports.
Auckland's a booming city with a council that's struggled to keep up with consents crucial for vitally needed new homes. It says it's on the improve. It's consented more than 14,000 new homes in the last financial year and says 60% of consents were issued within 20 days, up from 50% the previous year. But it still needs to get faster, and that takes people. The Chief Executive, Stephen Town, says building inspectors and planners are in hot demand, and the council's competing with the private sector for them.
They're being snapped up with offers of, money and cars and other benefits, which, we as a public service organisation, entity, we simply can't compete at that same level.
He says it's an ongoing challenge and it's had to think outside the box. The head of corporate finance and property, Kevin Ramsey, says the council's made 2 recruitment drives to Canada, securing 25 new staff.
The Canadian rules are quite similar to New Zealand building standards. So they've got some people brought across here and actually they've slotted in quite quickly to actually increase that competent workforce you're talking about.
He says most of them have come in as skilled migrants, with a plan they'll stay with the council for at least 2 years and a hope that some will become permanent residents. Most of the extra 400 jobs added to the council in the past year have been because of an increase in regulatory work like consents and extra work created by new water quality and environment projects funded by targeted rates. And today's report shows the number of people earning 6-figure salaries in the council has risen again, up about 200 on last year to more than 1,500 people, or about a fifth of all staff. Mr Ramsey says one of the reasons is the cost of living increases that push people into new salary bands. But there is another major driver.
We've brought extra people on board, and some of the reasons is things like the natural environment, the water quality initiatives, which we've got targeted rates to fund. They require expertise to come in and actually implement those programs, and those people are costing us more than $100,000.
And 25 people in the council are earning more than $360,000. That's 4 more than last year. I Tamaki Makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
It's almost 16 after 6, and if you're wondering, you're indeed listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Mangere residents say they won't sit idly by while their young people die, and they're calling on those running for election to step up and ensure support services are easy to access. Recent details about the torture and murder of a vulnerable 17-year-old have shocked and saddened residents, and they say there has also been a number of youth suicides in the last year. Locals say change is desperately needed. Jessie Chang filed this report.
Peals of laughter echo over the playground at Mangere Centre Park. Kids are zooming down the slide and running around. But less than 500 metres away is the scene of what's been described as the barbaric torture and murder of teenager Demetrius Pairama, who spent the last year or so of her life in Auckland. For 3 weeks, jurors in the Auckland High Court heard how the 17-year-old was stripped naked, tied to a chair and burnt before being asked how she wanted to die. A vigil for the teenager was held last Friday at the park. Resident Justin Latif helped to organise the gathering and says there are many more heartbreaking stories.
We had another girl whose family live around the corner from us. She died in a car accident, but she was running away from police. And there's been, last year was a number of, I think it was 2 or 3 suicides.
Justin Latif has lived in the area for nearly 9 years. He says Mangere kids have a lot of potential.
You go to the memorial services or you talk to the family, and these people had hopes and dreams and aspirations, but for whatever reason they also got just caught up in really unfortunate stuff. It's just such a sad waste of potential. How can we just sit by when we have our young people are dying?
The 2018 census results showed that more than half of the Mangere or Tahuhu population was under 29 years old. But despite that, Mangere Town Centre Crime Prevention Officer Tony Halua says there isn't a space dedicated specifically to young people.
We see the local libraries being that place at the moment, yet we know that libraries can't really facilitate, for a lot of the youth. Sometimes they act a bit loud and rowdy, but that's youth. For youth to have their own space where they know they can come to any time, then that could be where we are able to plug in the services that they need.
Tony Hiller says while there are a lot of organisations doing positive work in the area, they aren't working together.
I was working with one youth. I did ask who was looking after you, and that usually means what organisations are you with? And it was really interesting to hear that youth had about 3 different organisations attached to them.
Ms. Hiller says that can be very confusing for young people. She's working with other organisations on a strategic youth plan to ensure services are cooperating with each other. Advocacy group Accelerating Aotearoa works specifically with youth in South Auckland, including preparing them for the workforce. Its founder and chief executive Judy Spate says working with young people can't just be about ticking boxes and getting numbers.
I've seen a lot of those providers, like NGOs providing government services, they've got too far away from the people, they're not close enough to community, they're too busy probably just doing the do rather than getting really involved at grassroots with what's happening in their own communities.
So what does the Mangere community want to see from their local board and the Auckland Mayor?
Please make sure you are a voice for all, for our youth. That means our youth that are literally swept under the carpet or falling through the gaps, through to the students who are doing absolutely amazing things. I just want the whole picture. I want all youth to be involved and to be catered for.
We need a coordinated approach where we fund social workers and youth workers to really engage our young people.
The big test is the ability to step away from self-interest and the ability to work at grassroots with real people understanding the real issues.
Voting for the local elections runs until noon on the 12th of October. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jesse Chang tēnei.
There are concerns a former landfill only metres from Ocean Beach in Dunedin is an environmental time bomb. The Dunedin City Council will go to the public in coming months to gauge what they want to happen with the temperamental beach, but experts say serious consideration needs to be given to the landfill lying next door under Kettle Park. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has the story.
Ocean Beach has been the front line of man's battle against nature in Dunedin for more than 100 years. Associate Professor Mike Hilton from Otago University says the current geography of the beach, which runs for 3 kilometres along the city's southern coast, tells the story of a long history of human intervention.
It's important to understand that the council has inherited a landscape, and that landscape is really a function of all the decisions that have been made in the last 110 years. So the current council is dealing with a situation where much of the old dune field and some of the beach has been reclaimed, including the Kettle Park landfill.
Ocean Beach is divided roughly into 3 similar-sized beaches, St Clair, Middle and St Kilda. Lying only 25 metres from Middle Beach, behind a clay-capped dune, lies the Kettle Park landfill. Storms tore sand from the beach earlier this year, exposing construction material used in the clay cap. That and the environmental fallout caused when a disused landfill ruptured into the Fox River shows it's imperative to take action.
In the worst case scenario, that's not enough protection. That's not enough buffer between the sea and the landfill. I mean, it's always going to be a little bit of a lottery as to how much time you've got. Resiting that landfill, excavating it, moving it somewhere else has got to be one of the council's options.
The question is just how much time does the Dunedin City Council have?
If we had a sequence of very large storms, closely spaced, separated by days or weeks, as occurred in 1978 when we lost the entire fortune at the St Kilda end, then you might be in big trouble. But I think the council can reasonably bet that they've got a few years to come up with a long-term plan.
The council has taken temporary measures this year, laying 100 sandbags along a 50-metre stretch of the beach to capture sand and shore up the dune. The council's Infrastructure Services General Manager, Simon Drew, says that's having a positive impact.
It's only been a month and the sand has returned and risen sort of 2 metres, the foreshore.
Mr Drew says decisions on what's next will involve the community. He accepts the status quo can't stand in light of the threat of sea level rise, and for almost a decade the council has been gathering data and building its options.
We are close to coming to the community with all those options, so it's a complex, dynamic environment with a number of management options for the medium to long term. So we're trying to distill all of the information we now have down into something that's easily understood by the community.
St Clair Action Group co-chair Richard Egan says the situation at Kettle Park needs serious attention.
It's a diabolical problem, and we need to think about that proactively, not be reactive because we have the perfect storm. So that needs to be considered very carefully by the council with the community.
Mr Egan says he's cautiously optimistic about the forthcoming consultation on the wider Ocean Beach area, though talk is cheap and the newly elected council will need to back it up.
Their stated mandate was to monitor and maintain, so it's been reactive rather than proactive. So there's been a real lack of action, lots of talk around it, but a real lack of action on a very important asset to Dunedin.
Mr Egan says concerns over the landfill are only one piece of the puzzle, and other issues such as amenity and beach safety have to be addressed as well. The council is expecting to present the information and begin consultation in November. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
The Secretary of Tonga's suspended Rugby League board says today's election of a new Prime Minister may bring a very public dispute to a resolution. The acting Prime Minister had urged the Rugby League International Federation to suspend the board after a public falling out with coach Christian Wolff. Now that plunged the national team into disarray, with senior players threatening to boycott upcoming test matches unless Wolff was reinstated. William Edwards says the acting Prime Minister should never have got involved, and he hopes the new PM will reinstate him and allow a new coach to take Mate Tonga forward. Alex Perrottet has more.
The saga has taken yet another twist today with Tonga's election of Poiva Tuionetoa as Prime Minister. The acting Prime Minister Semisi Seka was himself part of a previously dismissed Rugby League Association, which the Supreme Court had earlier ruled mismanaged funds. But a letter he sent to the Rugby League International Federation prompted the international body's chair, Graham Thompson, to send this statement.
The RLIF board vote unanimously that the Tonga National Rugby League membership be suspended with immediate effect while these matters are properly investigated. The RLIF, at the request of the Tongan government, will work with the Tongan Sports Council to ensure that the forthcoming international calendar is not undermined.
But the suspended board's secretary, William Edwards, has launched legal action saying the RLIF should have accorded the board some natural justice and asked it to answer the allegations. He says it was way out of line for the acting Prime Minister to get involved.
He was a president of the Tonga National Rugby League Association, which was ruled against twice for misconduct and so forth on 2 occasions, and he was president.
You're saying he had a clear conflict of interest there?
Yeah, and he should never have involved himself.
When the suspended board sacked Christian Wolff as coach, senior players like Jason Taumalolo and Andrew Fifita threatened to walk away from the team. But William Edwards says Wolff was dismissed for refusing to communicate with the board and demanding too much control.
He chose not to speak to us. He tried to force the hand of the players to actually push the board out. He didn't want to even reconcile the issue, and so that's just unacceptable to us. And he caused this whole problem. People have to accept Christian Wolff is finished. I don't know why people keep thinking he's coming back.
Mr Wolff is due to take up a new role with the St Helens Rugby League club in England in November. He could not be reached for comment after several attempts to reach him, but RNZ has seen correspondence showing he does have the backing of several senior players. But William Edwards says only about 8 of the squad of 55 players might boycott Wolff's dismissal, and he says the team can make do without those marquee players.
Which ones are marquee? Jason Taumalolo, yes. Andrew Fifita, no. Will Hopewade? No. He can be replaced.
He says the game has changed with today's election of Poiva Tuionetoa as Tonga's new Prime Minister, and he was on the way to speak to him late this afternoon. Rugby league might just be a sport, but it's no doubt high on the agenda for the incoming leader. Tied up with all of this is the reported involvement of controversial rugby player Israel Folau. He was touted as making an appearance in the upcoming matches after his high-profile sacking by Rugby Australia and the Wallabies for his offending tweets against homosexuals and others. William Edwards says he's open to welcoming the polarising superstar sportsman back to the Tongan fold.
I support him because he's Tongan. All he did was come and ask us to play, and he's done nothing wrong to our association and that. Look, a lot of us don't support his views, but what law did he break?
While the Australian NRL has made previous statements against Folau's return to rugby league, there are highly respected players and former players starting to rally around him. Benji Marshall told Fox Sports it would be unfair to stop him playing.
I definitely don't agree with the things you said, but to me, we need to decide what we forgive and what we forget. Because I see, and this is just my personal opinion, I think domestic violence is worse than what Israel did. I don't agree with that, but yet we let people who have done those actions come back into our game.
The new Prime Minister, Poiva Tuionetoa, could not be reached for comment today. Following the mid-October Nines tournament in Sydney, Tonga plays Great Britain on the 26th of October in Hamilton and Australia on November the 2nd at Eden Park. Just what the makeup of that team is yet to be seen. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And just before we head off this evening, Grandad Kay has been in touch and texted in saying, I went on the walk to support my children and grandchildren. He's talking about the Climate Change March. It's essential that people, businesses and governments initiate some hard thinking and urgent constructive action. Corporates, polities and industries which pollute or create byproducts that undermine the environment must find safe alternatives or fully fund solutions. The science and the urgency have been known for a long time. Grandad Kay says there is no time for excuses or procrastination. New Zealand must make changes across the board, town and country. Thanks for getting in contact, Grandad Kay. Don't forget, our cameras were out on the march today, so you can check out all that footage on our website and Facebook page. Have a fantastic weekend.
RNZ News at 6:30. National MPs defy the Speaker's ruling to take down political attack ads by 5 p.m. today. Young Pacific climate warriors tell the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and other world leaders they need to do more. Christchurch Councillor Dion Swig says he has not been told who the 3 13 to 21-year-olds are who have made allegations of inappropriate behaviour against him. The number of people at Auckland Council earning six figures has grown by about 200 in the last financial year. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The polling still also suggests that Boris Johnson has a much more favourable rating as Prime Minister than any of the other possible candidates out there.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.